You're probably here at this video because you want to understand what's happening with the banks and then understand what's going to happen next. I want to go about it in two ways. First, I want to show you this spreadsheet I've created to analyze the banks and their current position and determine why some banks are being run on and others aren't, and who's going to collapse next and what you might be able to do about it. Then what I want to do is get into what caused this and is it justified, and why did Jerome Powell raise interest rates to put these banks in this precarious position, and was it the right thing to do or was it the wrong thing to do? Now, all of this is just going to be my opinion, and that's all it is. It is not financial advice, and let's get that out of the way first.
Best of Us Investors presents Kerry Griegmeyer.
My motive for putting this spreadsheet together was to try to gain a better understanding of what is the situation going on here and how is it that some of these banks are being run on and others aren't. So I went to Seeking Alpha and filled in these columns to give me a better understanding of how do these banks relate to each other and why are some of them being run on and others aren't. And my basic understanding is that they take our money, put it in as a deposit, and then they go buy investments to generate revenue, to generate interest, that they can then make a profit. Oh, okay. They pay us a little bit, maybe if it's in a CD or a savings account, but they're making money on the spread. And that was all fine when they could go and buy mortgage securities and bonds, and that there was a difference between what they were paying us and what they were earning. But as Jerome Powell started to raise interest rates, what they could pay us or what they could invest their money in or had invested their money in was yielding a lower rate than treasuries were. So as a result of that, astute investors said, hey, if I'm only getting 2% in the bank and the Treasury will pay me 4%, I need to move my money out of the bank. And the added benefit is the 2% is taxable from the bank, but the 4% from the Treasury bills are not. So any large investor, and in particular, it was these new startups who had billions of dollars that they had raised and were just having them set at the bank until they needed it. They went and said, hey, we want our money back. And as a result of that, they went underwater. Okay. And the smaller the bank was, the more severe it became. So what I did was basically put this chart together. And the first thing, column A, is all the banks that are basically in question. The second thing I looked at was what are their assets and what are their liabilities and what is the relationship of their assets and their liabilities. And you can see they're all pretty close. Zion Bank is the lowest. They have 105% relative assets to liabilities, and the best is MTB. M&T Bank Corporation at 114%. But they're all basically the same, and you see your largest banks here are between around 109 to 110%, meaning that they have 10% or 9% more assets than they have liability. So that's common thread. So that doesn't mean anything. Why I've made these red is because they are the smallest banks. Why these are yellow is because these are the banks that are under pressure, and why these are black is these are the banks that have folded. And what I'm looking for is what is out of line on these banks that are putting them under pressure. So I looked at their revenues, how much income were they making? And then what was the net income? That was, what are their liabilities minus their revenue, and I come out with their net income. I then say, okay, divide that into their revenue, and what's their profit margins, and you can see they're all pretty close to each other. The ones that are least are the biggest banks. Morgan Stanley and Wells Fargo and Citigroup. The ones that are the highest are the smallest banks. So that's not what's causing the problem. Then I got into this analysis of their unrealized gains. This is what Jerome put on them. They went and bought, as these deposits were coming in, particularly in 2020 and 2021, when there were a lot of SPACs, there were a lot of IPOs, there were a lot of new innovative companies that raised these billions of dollars, needed to put it somewhere until they needed it. And the big place they put it was in this Silicon Valley Bank. 40% of their assets were that money. And again, think of it as you're a SPAC, you're or a new company. You just got funded for $2 billion, and you know you're going to need it in the future. So you go put it in the bank. The bank puts it in the deposits. They buy treasuries or they buy mortgage securities. Now the current interest rate by the Treasury is 0 or 1. So you're not making a lot of money, but you're locking it up for, you probably are laddering it for 2 years, for 4 years, for 8 years, as you think the companies are going to need it. That all is fine and well because your spread, you still have something of a spread. Now what happened, as I said, is Jerome raises the interest rates. I'm young SPAC. I say I've got $1 billion in there. I'm getting a 1% rate from interest from the bank, but Jerome will give me 4%. And there's no taxes on that 4%. Get to the bank, take the money out, put it in the treasuries. That's what happened. And that's why Silicon Valley had a rush on the bank, and that's why they're insolvent. Now, that one that got it was Signature Bank, a similar situation. And now you have these smaller banks who are suffering these upside down interest paid and interest being paid situations. And here you see that in 2022, Pacific Bank had a $780 million deficit against their earnings. Difference from what they were making and what they were being paid. Now, if they could hold those assets to maturity, they'd get the full amount back. But this is what turned them into a negative position. And here you can see I have ranked them, or I have shown you, it happened to every bank. And here are your big banks down here: Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, Bank of America, JP Morgan. They had the same problem. And the percentage of loss relative to their revenues are the ones that got hurt the most are here. This Carmona, I can't pronounce that, Zion Bank, 103. That means they lost 8% more than they made on revenues. So they're underwater. Here's another one. This is Citizens. Is that right? No, that's Charles Schwab. This is an interesting one that we're going to look at tomorrow or someday in the future. But I've put in red the ones that are above the average, okay? Then what I want you to see is that this was not something that it happened when Jerome put it on them. Here you see that the prior year, they were up 66 as opposed to being down 791. The prior year, they were up 173. This year, they're down, this is Pacific West, 791. And you can see They all are in that position, particularly when we get to 2020. There's only one or two of them that were negative. Look at this one, though. This just baffles me. This is Citigroup. This is one of your top 4 or 5 banks in the country. They were losing money in this interest rate inversion for the last 3 years. That only happened to, here's this Signature, and here's this is First Republic. They've had the same mismanagement problem, and this is Morgan Stanley. They were upside down as well. But look at the percentages of upside down. Here, they're at Morgan Stanley's at 4%. Citigroup is at 45, 54, 67. How is that? That all their compatriots of the big banks, for some reason, Citigroup stinks like you know what. All right, so then I come down and I say, okay, what's their net income? Here we have their net income, but now that doesn't report the losses that they had this year in their unrealized losses from their bonds. So who lost the most net loss? That is your net income minus what you lost here in 2022, but you didn't have to declare. Well, the worst was Charles Schwab, and no, take that back. The worst is Citigroup. Here we look at Signature. They aren't all that bad, not compared to Citigroup and Charles Schwab. This just looks kind of goofy to me. So, okay, let's go over here and then say, okay, this is the price of their stock today. Okay, this is the high of 52 weeks. This, I divided the columns, and this is how far they are off their high. Again, look what's happening. They're beating up on the small banks, okay? And this is your bank run. And when I say bank run, I'm not saying these are people showing up, because I don't know how many people are showing up. What I know is the stock market is beating these people up. So there you have the only one that isn't being reported that we're in bad shape is Western Alliance. So be aware that they might be on the block. But we know Pacific or PacWest is this commercial Zion, KeyBank, and then you've got First Republic, and this one is the Sonoma Valley. It's already underwater. So this is what you're seeing. So what can you learn from that? Stay away from these banks. Down here, I've basically said, what I did then was count the number of red boxes relative to these stocks. First Republic actually only has one. Let's see where that is. That is, they're being beat up by the stock market. The one that Zion has 4. The one again, Citigroup has 4. But nobody's. In fact, Citigroup. This was another thing that I thought was interesting. Apparently the government went to the major banks, these ones down here, and said, "Hey, First Republic needs some help. Give them some money." That's probably what happened just last 2 nights. And here's who stepped up. So let's see, Trustist, PNC, Bank, U.S. Bank Corp, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America. Who didn't? Citigroup and J.P. Morgan. Now, my understanding is, and I don't know that I've got this right, but when they first asked J.P. Morgan, Jamie Dimon said, "No, I did that once. I'll never do it again. And he didn't come and say, yeah, I'll give $5 billion to help First Republic. Now, I don't know if that's changed. I can only keep up with so much. But Citigroup, as I understand it, they didn't either. And I understand why. They look to me to be the worst managed bank. But look, there's only a 23% drop in the value of their stock. Look at J.P. Morgan, only a 9%. This is kind of telling here. For some reason, J.P. Morgan is thought of extremely high, 13% on Morgan Stanley. But then you see these others, 75, 58, 59, 82, 80% drop in their stock price. So to me, to say to you, which bank should you stay away from? Right down here. First Republic, all of these. Stay away from them. If you got money in them and you got more than $250,000 in them, get it out. Now, again, Joe said you'll be okay. Do you have that in writing? Do you have that? Joe stood behind the podium and said that no one will suffer a loss on the $250,000. Do you have that in writing? I don't, so I don't believe it. I bank at Regions. Regions is in here, and so I don't have $250,000 in a savings account or a checking account. So I'm not worried about it because that is insured. We're going to talk about, though, tomorrow, what about your brokerage account? You might have multiple brokerage accounts. I have an IRA. Nita has an IRA. We have a joint account. We have a solo 401k. Each one of those accounts are only insured for $250,000. So my IRA is substantially higher than that. So is Nita's. Do I need to separate those? Do I need to take and move part of that to somewhere else? We got to get into that and figure it out. We're going to do a similar video on that. So this is what I would advise you to do. Get away from these banks. This is untested water, and it's obvious. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So don't expose yourself to it. Or should you run in and say, hey, Zion Bank is down 54%. That's a bargain. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because you don't know what Jerome's going to do next. If he raises those interest rates next week, like they say he is, 25 basis points, this is just going to get worse. And I want to talk to you about what I think has happened here and why I think this was wrong. Let's do that now. Okay, so why did this happen? It happened because interest rates ran up. Well, why did interest rates go up? Because Jerome raised the interest rates. Why did Jerome raise interest rates? Because Jerome's challenge from Congress is to keep inflation down to around 2%, 2 to 3%. And in order to keep inflation down, he had to slow the economy down. Because prices were going up. Well, why were prices going up? Well, eggs went up 3 times what they used to be. Why was that? Because of a chicken flu, Jerome. Because of a chicken flu. Well, used car prices went up. Why was that? Because there were no new cars available, Jerome. Why was that? Because we couldn't get semiconductors out of China, Jerome. That had nothing to do with interest rates. Well, why couldn't we get semiconductors out of China? Because China had shut down because of the coronavirus, Jerome. It had nothing to do with interest rates. Well, yeah, but the price of housing was going up, and that was because of a shortage of housing, Jerome. Had nothing to do with interest rates. Yeah, but the price of fuel went up. Well, the price of fuel and gas went up, Jerome, because the oil companies didn't make any money and had to shut down their wells and everything while we were all locked up and quarantined in our houses, Jerome. Had nothing to do with interest rates. It had to do, or the economy, it was just a shortage of fuel. And so there was more demand than there was supply. Come on, Jerome, it's supply and demand. And we just went through a pandemic where we broke the supply chain. Why did the prices of my sofas go up? And it took me 6 months to get them when I bought them. Because the foam rubber was made in China, Jerome. Yeah, the furniture was made in North Carolina, but they couldn't get the foam rubber that goes in the it had nothing to do with interest rates. My God. Isn't that all that complicated? We had never had a pandemic since 1918. That's what all caused this. And the solution was not to raise interest rates. The solution was allow the economy to get back on track when all the parts are working. There were a lot of the parts that weren't working. So we made a mistake. We did the wrong thing. Should Jerome have figured that out? I certainly would think so, but he falls back and says, my edict from Congress is to keep inflation down, and the only tool I have to keep inflation down is interest rates. Well, look at the bozos who are telling you. Look who's in our Congress. Tommy Tuberville, our ex-Auburn football coach, that bozo up in upper state New York who's a clown. Come on, our other senator used to replace Richard Shelby, who had been there for 30 years, was an ancient. He was older than me. Come on. And she was his secretary, and then she became a lobbyist, and now she's our senator. She knows nothing about economics. Look at your people. Look at the 80-year-olds that you have up there running this country. Come on. What we have now, what's going on in our banking system is attributable to one thing and one thing only: incompetence in Washington, D.C. They do not understand the economy. They do not understand how the banks work, and they screwed it up. Okay? So what do? All we can do is get the hell away from the banks until they get this sorted out, because they don't know what the hell they're doing. And if Jerome comes in next week and raises the interest rates up again, he's an imbecile. He's just going to make the situation worse. And you're going to put these banks further and further in jeopardy. Did they do anything wrong? Well, maybe Silicon Valley, too specialized in a small segment of the economy, and thus didn't have diversification. But who should have been in there? Aren't they regulated? Don't they have auditors who come from, where do they come from? Washington, D.C. to audit them. Come on. This is not that complicated. It's the bozos in Washington that we have running this country who don't have any understanding of the stock market. They don't have any understanding of how the economy works. They're there for one reason and one reason only, and that's to get reelected. Now, why would anybody want to go and rent an apartment in Washington, D.C. for somewhere around $200,000 a year and be away from their family because of the graft and the illegal money that they're getting? We got to clean this up. It isn't working. And if we don't walk away from this with that one thing learned, Washington doesn't work. It's got to be changed. First of all, you got to get some new blood out of there. You got to put term limits on these people, and you got to get people who understand business. The United States government is the biggest business in the world. And again, who's the highest paid government employees? Nick Saban, our football coach. And the next 10 are the other college football coaches. You've got to get this government run like a business. We thought we would get that with Donald Trump, and that's why he got in. We thought maybe we can get some business sense in there, but some other things went wrong, and I'm not going down that path. But come on, folks. This is our responsibility. We are the citizens. They are going to relieve these banks and to say we'll make them whole. Who is we? Joe, who is we? Will make them whole. There's only one we in this game, and that's me. That's me and us other citizens. When you bail these banks out, and it's not their fault, it's Jerome's fault. When you bail them out, you're going to make it more expensive for them to do business by raising the insurance on them, and they're going to pass those fees on to me and my friends and my viewers. And we're getting damn sick and tired of we're getting damn sick and tired of screwing things up and then putting the beast on our back. You took us to $9 trillion of additional debt, and I want it to stop. Clean this up or get the hell out. Okay. Now we'll talk tomorrow about our exposure with our brokerage accounts.